This is our CEO, Christopher Abadi, and I'd like to warmly welcome today's guest, Claudia Mancini. Now, she is a highly esteemed finance journalist and blockchain entrepreneur. One of her most notable accomplishments was being the editor-in-chief of Brazil's largest financial newspaper, Gazeta Mercantil. And she had a very long and strong tenure at Dow Jones, based out of London, the London branch specifically. And as of the beginning of 2020, she launched Block News. Claudia, welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, everybody. No, thank you for the invitation. It's a great pleasure talking to you.
Now, Chris, yes.
Yeah, go on. No.
No, Chris and I have been talking about this all weekend. So, we're very excited. And we also know that Brazil is especially positioned to be a very strong leader in the world of tech and blockchain in the next few years. But before we get to some of those points, how did you get into crypto? Because you're coming from, I guess you could say, a very status quo, traditional industry of covering traditional global finance. And now you're in the blockchain space. How did you make that transition? Because I know this, everybody has a story as far as what sparked their interest in blockchain and cryptocurrency.
Yeah, usually these stories are usually very interesting. But okay, so that was funny, actually. Okay, so as you said, I was a business and financial journalist. For a while, I was also working as a PR for financial institutions. So I had always heard about blockchain, cryptos, but never studied properly. But then in the middle of 2019, my sister, she invested in Bitcoin.
Oh, okay.
And I come from the traditional financial system, and I almost had a heart attack. I said, "Are you crazy? Do you know what you're doing? You are completely crazy." And then she, no, it's good. No, I think it's good, blah, blah, blah. And she said, "Do you want to know my trader?" I said, "You know what? I want to know the trader, because first of all, because I want to know who's making my sister behave as a fool. And second, because I want to understand a bit more about that." And he started explaining everything. He started with blockchain. He said, "Before I talk to you about Bitcoin, I'll tell you about blockchain." And then while he was telling me about blockchain, I started to remember the articles that I had read, but not with paying full attention. And then also I understood the technology, and I said, "Wow, this can change the world, actually, because this is the world of consensus, of transparency, of sharing information." And then I started studying it, and I fell in love for blockchain completely because of what it make with the business and less intermediaries and everything. And then I started studying cryptos, and I said, "Well, there is a word that is emerging. I mean, there is the word in the underground, and at some point it's going to emerge." So I decided that I was going to write about that, and I wanted to be in this sector. And I talked to some newspapers about that, and I said, "Don't you want me to write about that?" And they didn't understand what I was talking about.
Right.
The only answer they could give us, "But this is about fraud, right?" And then I decided to have my own website. So you know what? I'm going to make this coverage as if I was the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg, very business focused.
Yes.
So that's how Block News appeared in the ecosystem.
So with your interest and inspiration, you almost went 180 from traditional global finance to now focusing primarily on cryptocurrency. And by the way, I just have to note, so I think that is incredibly impressive. You were the editor-in-chief of Gazeta Mercantil. What was that journey like, your journalism journey? Like, how did you come into journalism? What made you passionate about it? And what was that trajectory like, especially, I guess, within Brazil, the financial environment and things you were covering?
Okay, so when I was a child, I remember myself playing as that I was a journalist. So I loved it. It's just from, I don't know, from the very beginning of my life. And economics was something that, in the 80s, we had this we were in a big trouble in Brazil. We had the debt crisis. And I remember my father following the news, and I was following the news with him, with exchange rates and debt crisis. And I became like a fan of economics. So I decided that I wanted to be a business journalist or financial journalist, whatever. And then I was quite lucky. I left university and I started working for Gazeta Mercantil, which at that time was the largest business newspaper in Brazil. I started as a trainee. I worked there for 5 years. Then I went to London to take a master's degree in Latin American economics, economy and politics. And then I worked for Dow Jones there. When I came back to Brazil, I went back to Gazeta Mercantil, and then I worked in many different products of the main newspaper. And then when I went back to the main newspaper, I was the international affairs editor and then editor-in-chief. So my career there was like that. So this is something interesting also because I have this, I'm very pro trade agreements that, help countries to be more competitive and more innovative. And it has to do also with blockchain in some sense, open world. Let's have an open world. So I think that also made me like blockchain. So that was my trajectory. And then I left the newspaper. I worked for 10 years as a PR for the serving financial institutions basically in defense. And then in defense, I started, I was a bit closer with technology, which was not my world.
Right.
And then it helped me also to see blockchain and like it, technology, blah, blah, blah. So it all helped me to be now in this ecosystem, this crazy ecosystem.
That's great. So growing up and then coming through journalism and then, achieving what you did, what for you were the most interesting, I guess, securities or investments to cover, just from a personal preference?
I think, well, actually, I was, when I wrote about economics and finance, I was always looking more at the exchange rates.
All right.
That was more my focus as a journalist. Then when I served,
so a lot of forex coverage, to say the least.
Yes, forex. Yeah, forex coverage. So you see, they all have to do with what I'm doing now.
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of what I wanted to bridge together. So now, going essentially 180. Now your focus and dedication is blockchain and cryptocurrency. Tell me your thoughts on El Salvador, because I recall when we spoke on the phone, you could say a lot of people tend to be bullish when it comes to El Salvador. They adopted Bitcoin. The future's looking bright. However, when we spoke, you did provide some insight, which I would consider healthy skepticism of problems they may be facing, or perhaps scenarios where this may end up failing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So considering my background,
yes,
I always look to the macroeconomy.
Yes.
I always want to see healthy economies, especially in this side of the world where we have great part of the people living, in poverty. So any analysis that I make as blockchain, enterprise blockchain or cryptocurrencies, I look at the fundamentals, which are very different from the fundamentals of traditional finance. But anyway, my view on El Salvador is that it was a decision made like I wake up in the morning and I decide that I go to Paris. Do I have money for that? Is there a flight to Paris?
Good
do
analogy.
I have a luggage? So it was a bit like that. So all of a sudden, the president decided that Bitcoin was going to be the currency. There was no proper study. There were no pilots, nothing, and that's very, and that's something that really caused me lot of concern because this is not something simple. This is not a
Right.
traditional currency. This is decentralized. We don't know what's going to happen to this currency. And there is something nobody in the country, very few people in the country understand what Bitcoin is and how
Right.
it works. And we who are in the ecosystem always say that anything that goes wrong with Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency is bad for us.
Right.
So we must have in mind that when we say something is good, we must be sure that it's good. And if it's not good, we must alert. Look, it's not going to work. It's going to be bad for all of us.
Right.
And that's my view. I mean, El Salvador is a country that has its currency is the US dollar.
Right.
So what it means that the monetary policy is not made by El Salvador, it's made by Washington.
Right.
Right? It is very important. This is very, very important. So okay. And then they have another another currency that is decentralized. So
Right.
how can you make a monetary policy if you don't even have any control of the currency? And that's
That's a very
important.
good
We
point.
know that in crisis, that's very
Yeah.
important. So that's my view. I hope it works. I don't see how it's
Right.
going to work.
Right. And from a journalism point of view, do you think that leaders in blockchain and cryptocurrency have a duty to be self-critical or self-police their, views or news? So for instance, do you think that a lot of blockchain leaders, if they really feel a lot of skepticism about El Salvador, do you think they should have a duty to say that? Because like you're saying, if this doesn't work, this will really undermine and damage credibility of anybody who's in this space.
Yeah, I think so. I don't like when you have we should not be 100% pro something or
Right.
100% against something because everything has its goods and bads anyway. But I think the sector itself should be ready to raise the hands and say, well, this is not good. This is not
Right.
going to work. This will affect me. I have seen lots of crypto exchanges saying, wow, look, you see El Salvador, the first country, we will see
Right.
others. But, well, they buy and sell cryptocurrency. That's how they make money, with people buying and selling cryptocurrencies. But we
Right.
should see this in the longer future if we want this to have a longer future. So yes,
Right.
you must be critical. I must be critical about my business. You too. If you
Right.
don't say it, it's not going to
Good
work.
point. Yeah. Absolutely. And as far as an alternative, do you think there is another country in Latin America who would probably be better to try this first, whether it is Brazil? Because, I think for over 20 years, Brazil has been coming up a lot in financial news as a next, possible economic superpower. So a lot of times growing up, when I would hear about China and India, Brazil would also be mentioned on that list as well, especially for being a very large country, having a lot of natural resources, but also having an emerging tech sector that is pretty substantial as well. So do you think Brazil may have been better to try this, or maybe some other country in Latin America? What do you think?
Again, if you want to try this, you must
Yes.
try it in the right way.
Okay.
You may say, well, this is not the legal currency, but
Right.
this you can use it.
Right.
Which could also be a problem because how would you control the economy if we have like any kind of crisis? And you have to remember this is a very unstable part
Right.
of the globe, right?
Right.
This is very unstable economically speaking, so we have to always be sure. So I don't know who would be better with the cryptocurrencies,
Got it.
but in any way, I think that governments should not try to, like China, no
Right.
cryptocurrencies at all. It will happen. It's like cigarettes. If you say
Right.
we will ban cigarettes, well, people will make, they will find a way to find cigarettes, buy cigarettes, and smoke.
Right.
So that's it. I think we have to try to find, a balance.
Right. That's a very solid point. And you know what? I would be hard pressed to say that even the U.S. would be ready, because I think whether it's El Salvador or anybody else, and Chris and I, we rant about this a lot. Most people don't have either a genuine interest, or they at least possess a great hesitancy to really get into blockchain and even Bitcoin. So, even if we look at the United States, maybe outside of the city areas, it would be difficult. But even within the city areas here, it would be particularly difficult as well. Even if Chris and I were, let's say, on 42nd Street in New York City, and we were to try to pitch this to the average person, I don't think the average person would be very well receptive unless they were already deeply in this space. And then maybe that could be like a 15 or 20-minute conversation. But I wanted to know this. I feel financial policy often is political. It often is, you could say, general political policy. And I think much of those go hand in hand. What is your feeling about President Nayib Bukele in El Salvador? I don't think he is doing this recklessly, but at the same time, too, I don't think he's entirely showing his hand. Part of me also feels, is this some sort of influencer tactic? Because certainly I'll tell you this. I would definitely think that the attention, and I think the decision that he made with Bitcoin probably causes more volatility. So I want to know what your thoughts are on him and maybe his cabinet and his administration from a pure journalistic point of view.
Okay, so President of El Salvador, I mean, if you follow his history as president, he has taken some actions that we would all consider not very democratic, um, because of what he did with judges, because the
Right.
pressing the justice and Congress and everything. So well,
Some quasi-authoritarian moves on his part over
yes,
the years.
authoritarian moves.
Yes.
Yeah, a bit like our own president has tried to, and has been
Right.
bared by the by the justice, the Supreme Court, and
Right.
also the Congress.
Right.
So and then he has the control of the Congress, and that's very important. That's why it was very easy for him to approve the law that defined Bitcoin as a legal tender of the country.
Sure.
So if you want to be very innovative, I think point one, you must have an innovation policy in your own country. That's point one.
Yes.
And then you want to have to very clear for you and the people, because the people are paying for your salary. You must make it very clear for the people, okay, this is my innovation policy, and I want to take this country to this point in 10,
Sure.
say 5-10 years. I haven't seen anything like that there. And he wants to seem very innovative just because he adopted Bitcoin.
Right.
This is not innovation for me. Innovation that's not like innovation emerges.
Right.
So I think that it was, for me, it sounds a bit more, let's make news,
Right.
because it's news. If it's good or bad, we know
Right.
in Brazil we have the saying, tell bad things about me or good things, but talk about me, everybody talk about me.
Right. Right.
And I think that was his strategy.
Wow. And I believe when you and I were talking a few weeks ago, you had mentioned that President Bukele also was a former marketing executive, which I find very, very interesting and very suspect now.
Yes, I heard. I read something like that. I think he had his own company, apparently, or worked with. I
Yes.
think he has his own company, marketing company. So when a politician comes from marketing, I have nothing against marketing. Huh? Let's be okay. Nothing against.
Yes.
On the contrary, but you have to look at, is he going to use that? How is he going to use that? If the president is a former doctor or lawyer or whatever, it's going to
Right.
bring what he knows about that.
Yes.
And I think that's more Bitcoin in El Salvador is more about that. I mean, first of all, has he taught people about what Bitcoin is? What are the benefits and the
Right.
risks? Because there are risks. And I always say,
Right.
you must know the risk. You must know. Otherwise, it's not going to be good for you. It's not going to be good for me.
Right. And, based on things that he's done and said, and I think between the three of us, I think we all hope that Bitcoin ultimately succeeds, in a setting that is widely used by people within a country. How would you expect him to pivot, dodge, or even kind of deflect this if it fails? Based on what you know, what do you think that will do for the next few years for other countries who want to do this? Because right now, and I could be wrong, he is the unofficial mouthpiece of both Latin America's adoption, but also I think adoption for everywhere else too. So it kind of, for me, seems like I think all the cameras are on him, for better or for worse.
Yeah. Okay. When I started writing about blockchain, remember that I talked to people and newspapers about writing about blockchain, especially enterprise blockchain and also crypto. And people said, this is about fraud, right?
Right.
Okay. So then the prices soared and we saw record prices. And then I talked to companies that sell blockchain solutions, and they said, you know what, it's easier for us to talk to companies because the price of Bitcoin is increasing so much and so many people now enter the market. Now people want to know more about blockchain. There is this more positive view. I am worried that the case of El Salvador, if it doesn't work, suppose that it doesn't work, we don't know,
Right.
but anyway, if it doesn't work, people, even if it's like a small economy, but people will say, you see, not even in a small economy it works.
Oh, that's a very good point. Yeah.
Imagine in an economy like the US or Brazil, which
Right.
are among the 8 largest economies in the world.
Right.
It doesn't
Bigger,
work.
more complicated. Yeah.
Of course.
Right.
So what the president of El Salvador did is that he has a burn to carry, because if it doesn't work, you have to respond for that.
Yes.
For all the ecosystem, for all the Bitcoin community.
Right.
And he'll have to answer, why is that it didn't work in El Salvador but could work in Brazil if it doesn't work? Let's say that.
Right.
And if it worked, and then people will say, okay, it works in El Salvador because it's a small economy. Will it work in Brazil? Well, but at least we have one step ahead. Let's see.
Wow, that's a very good point. So and now thinking about this, so he even runs the risk of having to speak on behalf of parts of blockchain that almost have nothing to do with him now at this point. So it seems like he's kind of cloistered himself in this little area where it kind of puts a big bullseye on him, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think I would guess that he didn't even think of that when he decided to do it. The impact, the global impact of that, of the discussions and everything.
Right. And being where you are, how does it look to you with what's going on in the United States? So now you have the SEC jumping all over this. So there's going to be, there's regulation being passed and more regulation to be passed. What do you think of a country like the US and their approach to trying to regulate this? Because I think it's a little, when I look at this, on one hand, I feel if you look at Wall Street, most of them want to see the status quo stay there. And I think there's a few now that are starting to warm up to it. And I look at DC, I feel like when they speak on it, I don't think they really understand it. And I think maybe, are they just trying to look at this as a pure security? And I do feel like, are you guys passing law? Are you guys trying to catch Jello at this point? That's how I look at it. So I think, is this something that you think that's a little ridiculous? Is this like, is this a ridiculous way for, let's say, a world power to try to handle this?
I would say that exactly because it's the world power that is doing it.
Right.
Because, if we let it happen. And then again, if it doesn't, because we always have to think, is it going to work or not? Because it's so very new and we're not going to, we don't know what will happen in 2, 3,
Right.
4 years. So because it's the word power, I think DC thinks we must be very careful, because first of all, we want the dollar to lose its status,
Right.
first of
Despite,
all.
despite the fact it's practically a zombie at this point, the U.S.
Yeah.
dollar.
So the dollar has, it's the main reserve currency that we have in the world by
Right.
far. And then they say, well, I don't want it to lose its status. I don't want to lose my capability of controlling the currency, making monetary policy.
Right.
I also heard someone in DC, I don't remember who it was, but said, if we make a mistake, all the world will pay for our mistake.
That's very good. That's a very
because
good point.
it's the dollar, right?
Right.
And because it's the largest economy in the world. So I think the DC as other places like Brasilia,
Yes.
our DC, they are worried about that. I mean, the Brazilian Central Bank is now working on the Brazilian Central Bank digital currency.
Right, and I heard about that.
And because, well, we have already this instantaneous payment system. I mean, I can send you money in seconds. And it's very easy.
Right.
Easier than trading or paying with Bitcoin. And they did it because the Brazilian, the president of the Brazilian Central Bank is a guy who likes technology. He comes from the financial sector, but he loves technology. And he said, it must be easier than trading Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. So here we have this. It's what I think it's Fed now or something that you have in 2024, something like that. We already have it. So we're they are studying the CBDC, not for this, but
right.
You know what? To have DeFi. Right?
Right.
But they want DeFi controlled and made with the Brazilian Central Bank digital currency.
Wow. That's very interesting. Yeah.
They are all making things in a different way. So the US is talking a lot about regulation. We know that in Brazil the regulators are working on it, but they don't have such a very hard view on it. But they are working on the CBDC, and they clearly say the CBDC is, we're doing it because, and we did PIX. It's called the instantaneous payment system. It's called PIX.
Right.
And it's had PIX and CBDCs because of the cryptocurrencies. It's one of the reasons, and one of the main reasons. So I understand that DC is worried about, but and you say it's funny because we're talking about an economy that it's pro-market, free market.
Yeah.
It shouldn't happen. But this economy is also the economy of the dollar.
Right.
So we have to understand if we agree or not. Well, it's difficult to say. I understand, but at the same time, would there be a better way to do it instead of tough regulation? Probably.
Right. And it's funny because you'll see leaders here in the U.S. and I would say most notably, and I like to pick on him a little bit, Warren Buffett. And he's a very successful billionaire businessman in this country. However, most of his wealth was created post Cold War, from the 60s to the early 2000s, by traditional securities. So he's one of the biggest critics of cryptocurrency and Bitcoin in particular. So I'll read about his stuff, and it's digital garbage, things along those lines. But I see it as very self-interested, and of course, whether it's being in the U.S. or you could say another pro free market economy, a lot of these things fly in the face of that. And if we were to go a little further, I look at China, for instance. So now they have an outright blanket prohibition of all cryptocurrency and cryptocurrency transactions. Now, for me, maybe they take those steps a little bit further than, let's say, the U.S., but I feel like, is this an opportunity for them to buy a dip, or B, there's some sort of maybe malicious in tension here. Because to be honest, I feel like the U.S. and China, they're almost counterparts sometimes based on the way they do things. I feel like if one team has to be red, the other team has to be blue. And I feel like everybody else, people, are always caught in the middle of that.
Yeah. Usually we are caught in the middle of that.
Right. So do you... Yes, continue.
Go on.
I was going to say, what do you think the China's strategy in this? Because I think we all know this is not the first time they have done this.
Okay, so suppose you are China.
Right.
And you kind of control the life of your people, right?
Yeah.
You know that in Brazil, if I don't know how it works in the US, but if I move from the state of São Paulo or the city of São Paulo where I am, if I go to the state of, say, Rio de Janeiro, I don't have to say anything to the government. I just have to change my home address. That's it.
Right.
That's it. I can use my documents there, and that's okay. But in China, the government wants to know where you live, and if you were not where you were supposed to, they want to know why you were there.
Wow.
So I'm just giving an example.
So do you need like a permit? Do you
need
something like a permit to move?
I was there a few years ago, and it was like this. I suppose it still is. I don't know, but suppose it's not. But at a few years ago it was like this. A few years ago it was like this. We know that rules about freedom in China are not like here and the US.
Right.
Right. So it is a centralized government. Very centralized. So suppose you were a very centralized government, Adam. Would you like to know that people are trading and using a currency that you don't issue, you don't control, you don't manage? No.
Right. Right. If I was in that seat, I'd be a little angry. I'd be like, "What's going on here?"
Too much freedom.
Right. Too much freedom.
It's okay. It's innovation. Well, you want to innovate? We have all these tech hubs to innovate, and they are all controlled by us. Okay. Even innovation is controlled. Remember that the Chinese government. This is very interesting because Chinese government. They said like 3 years ago that they wanted to be the hub of blockchain in the world, and they have many very interesting initiatives with blockchain. Very interesting, really. They are really using and testing in many things. I think more than any other country as a government. Right. But that's it. It's again they're doing it. It's in the hands of the government. So. What they did is like I'm moving with my own digital currency, which is the digital yuan.
Yes.
And apparently it's the country that it's more advanced in this process.
Right.
So
that's a very good point.
I would say that I was quite surprised that they only did that now.
Right. And if we were to go on the flip side, where in the world do you think is the most crypto-friendly, or at least among the most crypto-friendly of countries or nation states?
I have heard positive things about Germany about that.
All right.
I have talked to European people.
Yes.
Who have told me that Germany is a very friendly market, and they're investing in Germany. Like, they are launching services like companies from other countries in Europe, not Germany, but they say, okay, I'm going to launch this product first in my own country and Germany because of the regulation.
Wow.
Yes. And I see some initiatives related to investments, exchanges in Germany. So the Germans, it's absolutely free and you do whatever you want and we don't care. Remember again, the European Central Bank is in Germany, okay?
Right.
But it's like, okay, we have some rules, but we're not going to kill your business. It's just that we don't want this to be a mess. Okay? And that's
Very
it.
good.
So that has been a country that I think has had a quite positive view on that, because it doesn't allow it to be a mess. Again, a mess does not serve us, the
Right.
ecosystem.
Right.
But also it doesn't say, okay, I'm so sorry here. No.
Right.
Yeah. And Switzerland also, they have a good approach also. We have the Zug Valley.
Zug Valley. Yes. I've
Yeah,
heard of it.
many
Yes.
Brazilians are investing there.
Really?
There, we have lots of Brazilians there in the Zug
Hear
Valley.
that, Chris? We may have to take a trip to Switzerland.
Yeah, probably. I should move to Switzerland, maybe.
Yeah, skiing, chocolate, and tech. Let's do it.
Yeah. And so Switzerland also, it's been also, but especially Germany. It's funny because companies usually tell me about Germany in a very, very positive way.
That is awesome. Now, I've asked
about Liechtenstein also.
I'm sorry?
Liechtenstein. You know,
Liechtenstein. Oh, yes.
Yeah, but I don't know much. I would say.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I think I'll dig into that one a little bit too. I've heard a blip or two, and I'll get back to you. I'm always fascinated to see which areas are going to be coming up next or coming into their own. But anyway, listen, I've asked a bunch of questions, so I'm going to defer to our CEO, Chris. I know he had a few things on his mind, so good sir, the floor is yours.
Yes, well, thank you so much. It was really interesting listening to you speak about it, especially with El Salvador. For me, I take the viewpoint of a little more. I wouldn't call myself a Bitcoin maximalist, but I do feel that, you know, with what's going on in El Salvador, I feel like if you had tried to, what would be the right process if you wanted to roll that out? Like, who would you need to get approval from? And would those people even approve that? Like, if you look at the IMF, as soon as they said that they were going to roll it out, they were like, oh, no, you shouldn't do that. So what would have been the right way to roll that out? I feel like had he had not done it that way, there would have been so much red tape thrown up in front of him that it wouldn't have happened. So I feel by just taking that, all right, we're going to do this approach, because it's not like they're taking the whole currency and making, okay, you have to use Bitcoin. Bitcoin is opt-in. So they're not forced to necessarily use it unless they want to experiment with it. So everybody is given the wallet. They can use it if they want. And looking at how many people have downloaded the wallet, there are more people in the country that have downloaded the wallet than people that have bank accounts in El Salvador. And that's within, less than 2 months that it's been active? Let's call it a month, perhaps.
So, Chris, just to interject, so you feel that ultimately trial and error is ultimately better versus waiting for everything to be perfect? Is that what you're saying?
Bitcoin, it's decentralized. So who are you going to be getting the authority to roll that out from anyway? Because it's it's like gold. It's like you can use it as gold. If you wanted to, say, all right, we have the US dollar, but also if you want to pay in gold, you can pay in gold as well. And if you had that ability to have that instant conversion for gold, people could do it. We happen to have that with Bitcoin because it's, technology, and you're able to have that done with the Lightning Network and the Chivo wallet. So I feel like, there really is no right way, because this is a new monetary system. We don't know what the right way is going to be. It's kind of like, it's all about education. Like you said, nobody really knows there. But until you're forced to really not forced, but until it's like in your hand to use it, sometimes you really just won't use it. Like if you look at the pandemic and the older generation, how they were very hesitant to use virtual technologies and Zoom. And, now you talk to the older generation, especially those in their 50s and 60s and higher, they have a phone now. They know how to use Zoom. They know how to open a Word document. As let's say before the pandemic, there weren't that many people that knew how to do that. Not until they were forced to actually have to kind of use it and it was in their hands, where they could, see it on the shelf against something else, where they can make that decision to understand that, hey, this may be a better opportunity for us. Because when you look at Bitcoin, I think too many people look at it as a currency and the volatility, and not look at the network and the payment rails that it provides in terms of remittances. And if you could educate the difference between the currency and the network, that's where the secret sauce is once people understand, hey, I don't necessarily have to store my wealth in Bitcoin. This is also just good for payment rail, for remittances, so I don't have to pay these high costs. When I send money, I can instantly turn it back into dollars if I'd like to. Because a lot of people, their minds are just programmed in dollars. So like to say, oh, you're gonna price something in sats, especially now, is just bonkers. So really the benefit for El Salvador is the payment rails in the back end, not what the currency and the store of value brings from the currency, but really the network and being able to transact with a very low cost in comparison to what you would do with US dollar.
Chris, so just to summarize, so do you think would you say with just more education, some of these issues will kind of solve themselves, right?
Of course, and that's with anything. And sometimes people will not pick up that book until they're forced to really learn until it's in their face and they have to use it. Just like the example I gave with the pandemic and a lot of people learning how to use virtual tools, until they're really forced to do it, older generations and people, they're just set in their ways. It took me forever to get an iPhone in my father's hand. And then still, up until like the other week, he didn't know you could buy a portion of a Bitcoin, and I've been talking about Bitcoin for 5 years. So it's like some people are just set in their ways, and until sometimes they're forced to actually see, black and white, is when that change actually happens. So, you talked about Bukele being like having a marketing background. And I just think of my past president being President Trump and what his background was in terms of marketing and businessmen. And it's just so funny because, we just went through 4 years of that. You know what I mean? Yep. So it really, I understand where you're coming from with that. But, he's a younger gentleman that, in terms of innovation, we looking at Bitcoin and the whole ESG and environmentally friendly and all of this. One of the first things they announced was using volcanoes to power Bitcoin miners. And I think that's absolutely genius because you're pushing this sustainable movement forward. And that even though it's not directly financial innovation, it's global innovation in terms of saying, hey, there's a way we can do this differently than everybody else. Like, who's using volcanoes right now to mine Bitcoin? Nobody.
Not a bad idea, though.
So I think that's pretty innovative in itself because now you're making other nations think outside the box in terms of what is money. Money is something that's backed by energy. At the end of the day, the energy that you put to extract the gold out of the ground is how much that money, that gold is worth. And you look at the fiat dollar, we all know this because we love blockchain. There's no extrinsic value behind it anymore. It was at once backed by gold, and now it's just backed by the trust in government. So I agree with a lot of what you say, but since I'm such a Bitcoin maximalist, like I don't like, what is it not working? How do we determine that it didn't work? You know what I mean? Like, what is the standard to say, okay, is it 3 years from now? Is it 10 years from now? What is that metric that says, okay, it worked or it didn't work? Because it's opt-in, you know what I mean? I feel like it will work for the people that opt into it, and it wouldn't work for the people that don't opt into it. I don't know. It's just a little weird for me. And
yeah, no, that's an excellent question. Like, what do you think, Claudia? What do you think the standard should be so people can measure whether it's working or not?
And listen, I'm just playing the devil's advocate here because I think what you're saying is 100% right. I've never visited El Salvador. I know it's a tougher life down there.
We need to add that one to the list too, though, El Salvador.
But I look at things optimistically in hopes of that. It will work out to show other nations that, hey, there is another way of doing things. You don't necessarily have to rely on the petrodollar. There's a new monetary system that's controlled by the people. And I think that's what really is the selling point to, the freedom that lies behind Bitcoin is it's voluntary. You don't have to use it if you don't want to. That's what makes it such a I wouldn't call it peaceful, because there are going to be wars, I feel, fought over this in the future, but it is the most peaceful revolution that we have, because it's opt-in. It's not, there's no force behind it. You have to, like you said, you didn't understand when you first heard about it. Oh, what is that? It's criminal money. Until you understood it and then opt into it is when you saw the value, and when Bitcoin became valuable to you is when you opt in. Because before you opted in, it held no value to you. Until you opted into the network voluntarily, then it became valuable to you. So yes, I'd like if you could answer that question for that I had asked earlier. What would be the metric to say, okay, it's worked in El Salvador, or what would be the metrics to say, okay, it didn't work in El Salvador?
Okay, I love what you said. This morning I was thinking, what's the best pace of innovation? What's the best pace? Should we do it very fast and you know what, I'm going to disrupt what exists, or am I going to do it in a way that, you know, nobody suffers much or a lot, or, you know, let's be very slow so nobody suffers, and then we change things. Well, if you go very fast, the problem is that, and I think that's the case of El Salvador, already answering your question, is that are you prepared for what can work and not work? And if something doesn't work, what's your plan to deal with it? So planning. My problem with this story is planning. What you do if something doesn't work.
Chris.
Oh,
Christopher, I think you're on mute.
So I'm sorry, but Bitcoin already works. So what wouldn't work?
Well, it works in its own, let's say, in its own environment. That's the first time that we have a country that says, you know, you can use it as a legal tender. Remember, this is different, okay? It's like saying, guys, from tomorrow, you can pay your bills in dollar in Brazil. Mm-hmm. Can you do it? Well, some countries did it, right? But they prepared for that. We have never been allowed to use dollar here, but at some point we had like R$1, $1. But we prepared the country for that. It was like 3 years preparing the country for that. And when it was not possible anymore, we stopped. We have to know the time to get in, the time to get out, okay? So my problem is planning, first of all. So this is first time, and innovation, if you innovate like in a garage, like Bill Gates, if it doesn't work, what happened to other people? Well, who are the other people?
Well, exactly.
Friends. That's it. Or the FFFs, you know, friends, family, and fools who gave you some money. That's it. But when you're talking about the country, well, if it doesn't work, and again, I'm always very worried about the poor people, because the poor people, they do not have a banking account, and they don't have savings accounts.
I hate to cut you off, but you keep saying if it doesn't work, but what is that metric? Because right now it's working. I could go into a McDonald's and pay for something that's working.
Okay, but there are benefits. What's the benefit? Well, it can be cheaper to transfer money, right? What's something very important in El Salvador, where, you know, about, I think, 20% of the people or something like that, they live abroad, and especially in the US. So what would be the metric? The metric would be, we have dollar and Bitcoin as legal tenders, and we have had no problem in our fiscal accounts, in our trade balance. We have, because of that, we can control our accounts, because when you control your accounts as a country, you are basically controlling inflation. And if you're controlling tax interest rates and inflation, you are giving to the people the basic what they need to have to live with dignity. Okay?
But like you said, DC already controls that.
What?
But El Salvador doesn't control the interest rate. DC does.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't. But there is, I think there are some interest rates, but they don't control. But if it doesn't make the system worse, because remember they don't control Bitcoin as well, and it's a network, and it's not. You don't control DC, but more or less you know what they're going to do, right? More or
Yeah,
less.
I think more or less. They
Bitcoin, do you
kind of
know more or
telegraph
less
what
what
they're doing.
the
Yeah.
network's going to do? So
Yeah.
that's for me the metric. If you
Okay.
can have like healthy uh, public accounts, that's good metric. If poverty was not has not had a negative impact because
Right.
of that, it's a good metric. If you say people is making transfers, paying less, this is a good metric. It works, So that's the metric. There is a metric. There is a metric.
So
But
is it
that
poverty?
we're
So
only going
if
to see
poverty
in the
goes
long run.
down, it's not working. And if poverty goes down, Bitcoin's working, and if poverty goes up, it's not working, because that could also be reflected in because of the dollar, because
Wait a moment.
poverty is
Wait a
going
minute.
up
No,
there now because of the dollar and the
no, can
and
you
the
repeat that? I didn't listen.
so so, I'm sorry. So how would that, Adam? Did you understand what I said there in terms of
Actually, I was going to ask if you could repeat it too. I think I might have had a little bit of
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
yeah.
So what you're saying is, the metric would be poverty. So if more people go into poverty, Bitcoin doesn't work. And if more people are out of poverty, Bitcoin does work.
Actually, if I could interject, so Claudia, just to clarify, are you saying that one of the drawbacks or one of the big issues will be that if this fails, this is going to be harder felt among people who are in poverty or around the poverty line? So if this project, goes to shit, so to say, who's really going to be hurt? It's going to be all, let's say, it's all going to be all the impoverished who try to jump on this. And let's say maybe they don't have internet access or don't have bank accounts, as you mentioned. And maybe I think if I was to read a little bit into this, if let's say the whales maybe, or the bigger players in Bitcoin, if they're making some sort of power play in trading this, may purposely deflate the price, and then so they can buy it cheaper. Like, these are things that are going through my mind, and I think you were touching on some of it.
Yeah, yeah. So there are two different things. Yes, this is one thing, Adam, and good good comment. Very, very good comment. Okay, so one thing, Chris, is that if you have a legal tender, that will have some effect in the public accounts. So I'm talking about public accounts, and it's very important because they can define if a country is more or less poor or rich. Okay, so this is one thing, and we have to see if it works in El Salvador. If El Salvador will be able to live with two currencies, and one of them being Bitcoin, that is decentralized, and have all these things things like what Adam has just said. So if it's possible, if the country is able to protect itself, if some whales do something that it's not good for other people, only for them, it's okay.
Right.
There is resilience. If you say, well,
Right.
but there is resilience in this story, okay, good, positive. If you say, poverty has increased in El Salvador, but has nothing to do with Bitcoin, has to do with something else, well, the problem is not Bitcoin, and we have to be able to separate things. Well, the problem is not Bitcoin, it's because the government, whatever, did something that was not good. The other thing is, well, the person is poor because, well, the person took all his money, changed for Bitcoin, and then Bitcoin prices fell, and the person is poor now, or even poorer than the person was before. Well, that's not the problem with Bitcoin. It's because you made a better bet, a bad bet. And education is very important. I think education, I have just said, Chris said. So there are metrics, and we have also to separate what is caused by having Bitcoin as a legal tender and what is caused by something that has anything to do with Bitcoin. There are things to see this. It is possible to know. We will be able to see. I'm sure we'll be able. And resilience. How much El Salvador will be resilient if something goes wrong. Because if it goes right, it must go well. It must go.
It has to be really good
First,
if it goes
when
right.
It goes, doesn't go.
Right. You can't just win by a little bit. They have to win by a lot when they pull this off, right? Is that what you're saying?
I'm sorry?
No, I guess what you're saying is if El Salvador pulls this off, they have to win by a lot, not by just a little. They got to really do this very, very well.
Oh, I hope so. Yeah.
Yes.
Otherwise, it will just be like, yeah, you can have Bitcoin, but it doesn't make any difference.
Okay.
Would the community be happy with that? With this? Oh, no. Yeah, there is Bitcoin in El Salvador. It's legal tenure. But you know what? It doesn't make any difference. I don't think the community would be happy with that. Would it?
Right. My feeling would be this, and I think it's somewhere in the middle. So let's say if I was not in the United States, let's say if I was in El Salvador, if I was in Brazil. On one hand, I would be very excited about Bitcoin because it appreciates. It's very volatile, so it can go up now like 10+% easily. And I think over the past 5 years, it went up well over like 10,000%. It was something ridiculous like that based on, what it was years ago. On the other hand, I would be worried, maybe after some studying, is this crypto really at the mercy of, let's say, both US and China? Because until recently, China was mining like 65% of the Bitcoin in the world. And then if you look publicly, the whales are mostly American, so I'm thinking to myself, if I was in a smaller country, okay, so is my money going to be dictated by either one world power or another world power? That's what I would be thinking. On one hand, I'd be really happy. Like, okay, I'm getting paid in Bitcoin. I had a great week. Wow. So my $5,000 check is now $8,000. Let's just say if we were to be modest. And on the other hand, well, okay, so China's doing something, and then Elon Musk is maybe talking about Dogecoin. So I'd be looking at the news. Okay, so where's this going now? That would be my feeling.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, very good point. Who is ruling my money?
Right, like is Xi Jinping determining the price of my money, or is Elon Musk doing it? Like that would be my concern, to be honest.
Yeah.
But with Bitcoin, since it's decentralized, nobody controls it per se. You know what I mean?
But if you buy a lot of it, then that's where the kind of the volatility comes in.
Well, exactly.
That's my point.
You look at China. China has 130,000 Bitcoin. You know what I mean? So they're banning it, but at the same time, they're holding it as a reserve because they understand, what it can do in the future if it does become that digital gold, and they're hedging their bets. I mean, they're not silly over in China.
Oh no!
I think we spoke about this earlier. They leapfrog while we were spending trillions in Afghanistan.
Right.
They were spending trillions in leapfrogging our technology and becoming a contactless, digital virtual society where they have so much data that it's almost impossible for America to catch up when it comes in terms of, you look at data as the new oil and the new, what holds the most value in
determines
society
superpower
today
status now, data and AI.
And being able to analyze that data and unleash AI onto that data for analyzation and coming up with new ways to do things and improvement and efficiency. And because of their population size, because of the technology advances they've done, I mean, China is leaps and bounds ahead of America, especially with, they have their own CBDC that they're already using. Like, half the politicians couldn't tell you what Bitcoin is besides the shadow internet money, like Elizabeth Warren. So it's like, it's really going to come from the people. I don't see it coming from the governments at all. I don't see the change coming from governments and the governments putting forth the change. I see people just changing over. You look at all of these NFL superstars that want to be paid in Bitcoin. You see all of these people, pay me in Bitcoin is this new thing that's going on. And a lot of high-priced, valuable items are only being priced in Bitcoin or Ethereum, and you can't buy them in dollars. So there's this demand there. And I think as people start to get, these digital wallets and can compare, the dollar sitting next to the Bitcoin or the dollar sitting next to a euro or a euro sitting next to a Bitcoin, and over time seeing that Bitcoin is the ultimate store of value, that's when, it's in their face and they're actually seeing it. Because right now they can't compare the two. They don't have the ability to have the two of them in their own account. They have to have a separate account over here for Bitcoin and a separate account for the dollar. And they can and then when they want to do stuff, they have to cash out, bring it to the dollar. Like, it's such a pain in the ass for me. The only thing I send money to my normal Chase account for is to pay my mortgage. Everything else now, Coinbase is allowing me to take my paycheck in Bitcoin, and I can just keep it in their account with USDC or Bitcoin, and I just use it from there. I don't even deal with the normal bank except for when I have to pay my mortgage, because because I know it's the ultimate store of value, and my savings is kept in Bitcoin, and that's where the education comes in, and giving the ability with the Chivo wallet for these people to see that right in their face, I think is part of the education as well. We're the people, they're making that decision, they're opting into it. They can, and what's great is with that wallet, if they see that the Bitcoin's tanking, they could sell right away. It's not like they're forced to hold on to that Bitcoin and watch it go all the way to the ground. They have that ability to sell it. And it is about that education, because if they're just going to buy it because they see a number go up, that's their own fault, and that's miseducation of them. Like, that's them not understanding the world.
And by the way, I just like to throw this in there as well. My position is somewhere in between you both, where I would say this. So I think we all know in the foreseeable future, Bitcoin is going to appreciate, but it's also going to be very volatile at the same time too. So we can at least say this: it has a set supply and demand, and it will probably raise many people out of poverty. There's not going to be this hyperinflation, so to say. And by the way, maybe Dogecoin runs that risk more because there isn't a set supply, so to say. But let's say hypothetically, us three are billionaires, and let's just say us three, between respectively where we're located, we own the lion's share of Bitcoin. So let's say we create a syndicate of sorts between the three of us, and let's say, okay, guys, ladies and gentlemen, let's create a dip so we can buy back more of this. So on such and such day, let's dump a bunch of Bitcoin, and then we just watch the prices appreciate. We see the market panic, and then you just see Bitcoin go all the way down, and then we all get on a call again. All right, let's start buying it back up, and then it just goes all the way back up. So I feel on one hand, you'll be really improving the standard of living for a lot of people. But let's say on the other hand, if us three are the three main, I guess you could say, whales, we can really play the seesaw and just keep making money, but also at the expense of other people, maybe other industries as well. So I'm somewhere in between. Like, this has a lot of great potential to really raise a lot of people out of poverty. This has a lot of potential to really provide maybe the first solid investment, maybe since the Cold War, seriously. On the other hand, there is always that vulnerability. Who owns the most of it right now? And are they going to play games with this? Because it does happen. It does happen.
And it happens even in the traditional financial system. It happens with money.
Right.
Let's say the truth here. Yes. It happens with money. It happens since the world is the world. I mean, it was with salt and then gold and then everything.
Right. Yeah.
That's how it is. Those who have more of that asset that it represents money, they try to force the market up or down. And again,
that's my whole point.
What's the resilience of a country, of a community, whatever, to face this?
Right.
That's always important.
And and I think even though maybe most people say they would never do that, but let's say hypothetically, if you're in that position, you're in that position, things change. I think that's just human nature. If you're able to, I think most people will. So I don't want to get too far on that, but like I said, my position is somewhere in between me and you. But honestly, this has been a great conversation. So many great points are raised. Claudia, what are you working on next? What's up on the horizon for you?
Well, I've been covering blockchain a lot. I started with enterprise blockchain, as I said, and I cover cryptocurrencies more from its institutional point of view. But now I'll start the coverage of the prices a bit more. We'll have also we'll start our channel on YouTube also. So
awesome.
We'll have like Brazilian and foreign guests, and you are already invited. So when you launch,
thank you. Yes.
there.
Let us know.
Yeah.
Please.
So and now, I mean, this has been like a bootstrap
Oh yeah.
investment, and
Same
I
here.
mean, we're now evaluating what to do if we. I mean, I had two offers of companies that wanted to buy a percentage of Block
Excellent.
News. Yeah, but the point is they were both exchange.
Oh,
Crypto
okay.
exchanges. I've seen some of my colleagues, they sold part of their business, but I so far I didn't want to. I want to keep.
Is it open to individuals though? Have individuals maybe indicated some interest in the future?
Sorry?
Individual investors, have any individual investors indicated maybe some interest in
not
buying
not
Okay.
yet. So I would be more interested in like angel investment or seed funds or something like that did not want Block News because they wanted to feed their other business.
Right.
So more of an independent investor that just want to see it grow and make money in the future with it.
And that is a good way to maintain its integrity. That is awesome.
Yeah,
hear,
I think that's
Seriously.
important, and
awesome.
and I think in a market like that raised so many questions as we had here. I mean, we had 3 views here about El Salvador. See that? It's very interesting. I love to hear Chris because he's like asking me questions that I have to think of. Okay, well, what
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Think about that. Oh, I know. So
Chris's passion is limitless. Let me tell you, since I've been working with Chris, his passion and energy, limitless.
No, but I love that.
I love blockchain. I love Bitcoin. I love discussing it and talking with people that understand it because there's not many people that do. I mean, there's plenty of people that do, but understand it at a deep level and the freedom that it brings, and what it can do for humanity as a whole, and talking about those ideas and the possibilities give me hope and give me faith because there's so much shit in the world today with everything that's going on that if it wasn't for blockchain and Bitcoin, I'd be really, really depressed because I'd be like, what is the escape hatch? How are we going to get away from this government control and authoritarianism? Like, as much as you believe in the vaccines or not, I was telling Adam the other day, I couldn't go into the city the other day because I don't have a vaccine passport. I had COVID. I have natural antibodies. I probably, am safer than the normal person in terms of being able to get COVID. But because I choose not to put something in my body, I'm not able to go into New York City now and meet people. So the authoritarianism is real, and we really do need that escape hatch. If you look at what, I'm sorry, I know we were ending, but you look at the Citicoin, what Miami's doing with Citicoin and how they're flipping it on flipping the way government's going to be run, because if the government needs to be beholden to the will of the people, people aren't going to invest in the Citicoin. And if people aren't investing in the Citicoin and that's their primary way of getting money, then they don't have any funds. So what's going on in Miami is very interesting with the Citicoin. I'm really looking forward to see what happens there with that, because I do think that's going to be the beginning of new forms of governance, being where people can take control of the areas they live in and what they do, and really take back the power from the government, where they can spend their money, print money, and give it to wherever they want, usually their friends, and give it back to the people, where it goes to where the people demand. If the people are demanding, let's end homelessness, or let's build this new road, or whatever the public service that's needed, will be the will of the people, not necessarily the politicians that were elected. So I'm sorry, I know we're ending, but I just wanted to get that out there. It's just so great to speak with people that understand it.
Absolutely. And Claudia Mancini, it was an absolute pleasure having you on. This was probably one of the healthiest debates of blockchain and Bitcoin I've probably seen in a while, and we got to do it ourselves. So I am very excited to see what your publication, what your news platform has to bring. Please let Chris and I know. We would love to be a guest. We'd love to contribute to your news platform. So please, whatever you need, let us know.
It was my pleasure. I love the conversation. I love to know your point of views. It was amazing, really. And we are in different countries doing different things. So
Right.
I think that makes the conversation more complex and more
Right.
interesting.
Yep, and I'll tell you this, I think Bitcoin and blockchain, it makes the world closer, to say the least.
I think, yeah. We're a community.
It can. Yes, exactly. Which is awesome. Claudia, thank you so much, and we will talk
Thank you so
very
much.
soon. Thank
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
All right,
Have a good
bye-bye.
day. Bye.
Take care.
You too.